attended because we just got home not too long ago, Saturday actually, after spending 8 weeks in Cheyenne working on behalf of We the People. So as Scott mentioned, I oversee House District 50, which is essentially East Cody, Ralston, Clark, Crandall, Hart Mountain area. So I am your rep, and Skull Creek, yeah, where Paul lives. Yeah. So this is my 3rd term, and I have to tell you, it was an amazing experience. If you're a conservative Republican, you know that we had a fabulous election this past election. And I can tell you, having served 4 years in the House of Representatives, it was amazing to be on the winning team and to pass legislation that really I would have never thought would pass. There was quite a few important issues that were really brought forth early on in the session that were priorities to the people. There were priorities when I campaigned, and I will go into some of the things that I personally did as your rep, and then I think, are we waiting till the very end for questions? Okay, so we'll each speak a little bit about our efforts, and then we'll save questions for the end. So I ran several bills this session. During the last session, I served as vice chairman of House Judiciary Committee, and so there were a couple of bills that I had, or ideas that were constituent bills that I brought forth, introduced them to the committee, and had them carried through the Judiciary Committee this session. They were adopted. One of them had to do with when there's an appeal in court. So basically, if there's an alleged domestic violence incident or stalking incident, and the victim goes to court, they get a stalking order, a restraining order, and then there's an appeal made by the other half. There's sometimes a period, a gap, so to say, between courts when it goes up to the higher court. And so that was a constituent concern for me coming out of here, our constituents' concern here in Park County. Again, brought that to Judiciary and was able to see that bill through the finish line. So now, essentially, if there's an appeal in process, that restraining order or stalking order stays in effect during that time period, so there's no gap. So I was excited to get that bill passed and signed by the governor on behalf of some folks here in Park County and some situations here in Park County. So Park County derived bill. I ran a bill that was titled Prohibition of Institutional Discrimination, and what that bill did was did away with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the state of Wyoming. I'm proud to say that that bill passed the House with flying colors, went through the Senate pretty easily as well, and eventually was signed by the governor. It's enacted into law, will go into effect July 1. Basically what the bill does is restores colorblind equality. It prohibits discrimination, just like our Constitution, United States Constitution, and the Wyoming Constitution originally strived for, really. And we all know that during the Biden administration, DEI was pushed into our community colleges, into our land-grant university, and into many government offices. And so no longer will, I'll just say DEI die. Yep. So, there was another bill that I ran, or there were several other bills that I ran. One had to do with prohibiting discrimination when it comes to adoption and foster care. And that bill went through, it did not come through committee. It was one of, I think, 6 or 7 bills that I carried. There was another one that I ran that was titled, it was called the CARE Act, and it protected pregnancy resource centers throughout the state of Wyoming. I worked with Alliance Defending Freedom on that bill. It flew through the House. It went through committee in the other chamber and wasn't considered on the floor in the Senate. Another bill I ran really came out of concerns from this region when it comes to our land-grant university and the way it's managed, and some of the concerns that were coming from parents who were sending their kids to the University of Wyoming. A lot of woke ideology and programs and things like that. So I was getting a lot of concerns there. The Board of Trustees is appointed by the governor, and so this bill expanded the Board of Trustees and allowed each district basically to elect a trustee. So similar to the concept of our community colleges. So that flew through the House, went into Senate Education and failed in Senate Education. So didn't get very far. Let's see what else. What else did I do here? I guess needless to say, and we'll probably talk a lot more about this, but the number one topic that we brought forth to Cheyenne and promised to deal with really was property tax relief. And I personally took it another step and said, I support reform, because I believe in reform. I think that the relief is kind of a Band-Aid, but I do acknowledge the fact that families need it because of inflation, because of the out of control property taxes, right? And the way that they're assessed, so to say. And so there was one bill that came out of the House the first 8 days of session, passed with flying colors, that provided 50% relief to everybody, and also provided backfill for counties and special districts. So that bill passed within the first 8 days of session, went over to the other chamber, and sat there for quite a while. The other bill that I wholeheartedly supported dealt with acquisition value. And I spoke a lot about acquisition value and during my campaign season. And that bill as well passed the House. That was House Bill 282 and was well supported. I don't think it was the first 10 days, but again, got a lot of support and went over to the other side and was killed in committee, unfortunately. So I am very optimistic, however, when it comes to the issue of reform. And the reason being is we have a very strong revenue committee right now in the House, very talented, a very devoted revenue committee that wants to work on a variety of different approaches and ideas when it comes to reform for the state of Wyoming. So what we have right now is temporary, and we'll talk a little bit more about that bill because it was obviously a group effort. But again, I'm optimistic for the people of Wyoming, and I definitely feel that I carried out my campaign promises for the people of House District 50. I would say that we went above and beyond campaign promises as a conservative, and so I'm very proud of the work that we did, and I'll leave it at that. I've talked for a while.
says it's good. Okay, turn it back off and turn it back on.
Need a guy to show you how to use it.
You know how to do that? Thank you.
Oh, that was terrible.
Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody, I'm Nina Weber, House District 24, and that's from 23rd Street, coming down through Cody and out to South Fork and North Fork, all the way up to the park. There's a couple of things as a newly elected that you think you know, but you don't. Here's one of them: sleep is important. My day started at 5 a.m. and usually with the committee meetings, it ended about 8 or 9. It was very busy. Nothing makes me prouder and more humble than to serve the people in this community in the state of Wyoming. There was an awful lot of bills. We had over 802 bills that were submitted. 500 and some got heard in some form or another. It's a lot of reading. I don't know if I've ever done this much reading in 7.5, 8 weeks than I have in my whole life. It was very, you hit the ground running. I sponsored 5 bills. One of them, 2 of them were actually from constituents. One of them was a homeowners association display of political signs. There are 4 bills that did not pass. There was that one that was a constituent bill, and that was, there's a lot of people that live in an HOA. Yes, they know some of the rules about it. What they maybe didn't think about, which is what I was asked to do, was to carry a bill that says, hey, wait a second, this is our First Amendment right to be able to show political signs of who we would support. That did not get out of the House. The second one that was a constituent one had to do with waiver of parental rights, not the parental rights part, but because you waive your rights as a parent, it does not relieve you of the obligation of paying for child support or supporting this child. That was a big deal to me because I had heard from many people that have said, hey, I signed over this and I was not told I had to pay any child support or any type of support at all. I thought that was kind of a big deal. The third one that I ran was a disclosure of undeliverable legislative emails. I do think that had probably gotten resolved by now, or at least through this session more emails came through. And then the fourth one was election integrity bill, which would have stopped a Medicaid card or a Medicare card from being used as identification to vote. As you know, those are just a card. It has a name and maybe a number of the plan that you're on, but it doesn't have a photo ID. And I thought that needed to be tightened up. Those got a little traction, but they did not pass. But the one that made a lot of traction through the House and the Senate was prohibiting foreign funding of ballot measures. And that one was kind of a big deal. There was lots of conversations on it and who was putting money into it and what's a foreign national and everything from penalties to, well, what does that mean if you live in the United States? What does that mean if you just have family here? What does it mean? Just all of the types of questions to stop foreign funding from coming into our ballot measures. And just so you know, that has passed and signed into law. And I told Governor Gordon, thank you for signing this, because I wasn't sure if he would, but I'm very proud of that. I also co-sponsored quite a few bills. I can say in the future I might not do this again. I sponsored 37 bills. 5 of them became law, and 6 of them are on the governor's desk right now, waiting or not waiting to see if he signs them into a law. Hopefully he does. There were a couple of committees that I was on. The ones that took the most work were the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee, as well as Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivision Committee. So every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I get to the Capitol about 7, between 6:30 and 7. The meeting with one of the committee meetings would start in the morning, the Minerals Committee in the morning, then have the session from 10 to 12-ish, and then from 12 to 2 would be the Corporations Committee, and then back into session from 2 until average time 7:30 or 8 o'clock that night. And we even met after on the corporations and elections many times in the evening. I can tell you that election integrity was a very important topic, not only for Park County, but the whole state of Wyoming. There was lots and lots of people who wanted to testify on any of the election integrity bills. The latest night that I was there was, we got done with, the session ended at about 10:30, 11-ish, and we had a committee meeting for elections and election integrity and corporations. We get in there, and there were 10 people there that waited because we had stated at the noon meeting that we would meet upon adjournment. And it just makes me feel really proud of Wyomingites that say, hey, I value election integrity. They stayed there. I knew it was late. I didn't know if they would still be there, but to see 10 people there, plus 4 people on Zoom, we let every person testify. We heard everything that they wanted to say. That to me says election integrity is pretty important in our state as well as our country. There's a couple of other committees that I'm part of besides those two for the upcoming, the rest of the year, and one is the National Committee for State Legislators. I'm on the Elections and Redistricting Committee, and then the last one that I'm on is the Select Committee on Legislative Facilities, Technology, and Process. I don't have all the information on all of these committees just yet, but I know it's going to happen shortly within the next couple of weeks. As a newly elected person, I can say that I've been down to Cheyenne watching the political process for quite a few years. Some of that with healthcare, some of that with oil and gas, some of that just because I like politics. But I can tell you, when you're on the floor, some things are a little bit different. And when you're sitting up in the galley, if you kind of get tired or you don't really want to hear about whatever they're talking about, you get up and leave. You can't do that when you're sitting down there. It was quite the learning curve. I am so proud of the freshmen and the House in general. I think we listened to a lot of what Wyoming people said, and I know for me, as well as the rest of the people here with Paul and Rachel, what we campaigned on, we delivered. And that I found to be kind of amazing, that everything we said we would do on our campaign promises, we did. It passed out of the House. Now, what happened on the Senate side, I can't tell you on that. But I know on the House, we did the job we came here to do. And that was to represent you with election integrity, to represent you with property taxes, to represent you with school choice, to represent you with eliminating DEI. We did that, and I like that. That is some progress that hasn't happened, I would say, ever. When I look back at the makeup of the House, and I'm just gonna use the word conservative or not, it has not been conservative for decades. And I know good people like Rachel has been fighting this battle with a handful of people right by her side. Like she had said, it felt good to win, and I can tell you that it is a lot of work. And in order to do that, we must continue fighting for the values that we value. And how do we do that? We ran as Republicans. I ran as a Republican. I believe in the Republican Party platform, and that's what I will support and defend. And I think my voting record will show that. I'm very pleased, even with the word Freedom Caucus. I know that in the media they're talking about Freedom Caucus. Oh, the Freedom Caucus has done all this. Well, I'm not a member of the Freedom Caucus. Paul's not a member of the Freedom Caucus. They have some rules that we didn't meet just yet. One of them was you have to have a voting record, and the other is you have to actually be invited to join the Freedom Caucus. So the members of the Freedom Caucus today happen to be people who have been there more than one term. They were very instrumental in training and showing us, hey, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. Just all of the questions, even from, do I have to bring my own like snacks and drinks? I didn't know that. They told us all of those things. Nothing makes me prouder than to serve House District 24 in the state of Wyoming. I know that we'll be getting to some questions and going into a little more detail as time goes on, but I think my time's up, and Mr. Paul Hoeft, you're next.
Well, good evening, everyone, and that's hard to follow up, all the good stuff we talked about. They poached some of my subjects, but that's okay. That's just quite all right. I'm Paul Hoeft from House District 25 of Powell, and a little bit out the outlying area of Park County. Can't hear me? Louder?
Oh, that's it.
Hold it really close.
Okay, gotta hold it closer. To say that you drink from a fire hose would be an understatement your first year in. All of the things you learned right off the bat is rather incredible. Got a lot of good help. I appreciate, I recognize many of you here that were very encouraging. Thank you for the great emails. And speaking of email, average email consumption is 750 a day. And so we try to keep up, unsuccessful. What I would ask in the future, I had a filter on my email that all the Park County stuff would come at the top, because you get emails from everywhere, including people out of state. That was what's really shocked me is, there's people trying to influence you from other places. And so we don't pay attention to those. We pay attention to our folks at home. They come first. So you need to know that. You guys come first. So we want to hear what you have to say. We respond when we can. I'll tell you, it's tough. You're doing something every second, and you're there many, many hours. And like Nina said, most mornings I was there before 7, and she'll tell you, we were the last ones out the door. But we're trying to get this thing going. So we did have, one of the things that I found very intriguing was working on committee. Committee work is absolutely fascinating. And you get to see and hear things you thought you'd never see before. We live in a bubble. In Powell, we live in a bubble over there. We really do. And so when you go to other places and you get to hear people's other perspectives on how life should be, you go, this is a thing? And it is quite shocking sometimes. And I'll tell you, when you sit across the room from an individual that's transgendering from a male to a female and testifies he wants to live an authentic life, I had trouble with that. I'll just be honest, because that's not authentic in my mind. But very respectfully listen to people and where they're coming from, and you learn to communicate with all kinds of different people. And so you may not agree, but you can agree to disagree, and maintaining that decorum is very important. Because if you have a runaway, things get a little out of hand, and we had some representatives that got excited about some of the things that were going on. But we did get to work very closely with Chuck Gray and election integrity issues. We made some progress there. Also on tax relief, and we heard something about that already. Immigration and accountability. It's very interesting. One of the things we heard over and over again was, well, we're not having that problem in Wyoming. Actually, we are, but it hasn't come to the surface. And just because something isn't happening, we don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive and protect the people in the state. So, one of the things that came up early was ESG investing, and a lot of folks were really worried about their, that I got a lot of emails on House Bill 80, which what this was, and they were concerned about their retirements, and rightly so. We want to protect those retirements. We take care of our state workers to make sure that the retirements are secure. Well, they were already. We hadn't had any ESG investments on retirements since 2023. Those are already gone, so state retirements were safe already. We rolled those ESGs back. Why would you invest in something that you get a less return? I never understood that. We always want to invest in things that give you a greater return. So we took care of that. Protecting the unborn, that was a very fascinating thing for me, because there was a bill that came across our Labor Health Committee essentially gonna make it a whole new bill. Well, it forced a particular senator's hand to rewrite the bill so it would actually become effective. And so working behind the scenes is just as important as introducing bills of your own. I had a lot of great ideas only to find out so do a lot of other people. When you start stacking up bills with the same ideas, they can get convoluted, so what you want to do is get together and work on those bills together. So, school choice bills and for some of our Second Amendment freedom bills, we work together on those to get those through rather than everybody throwing 10 bills that essentially do the same thing together. One of the things that I co-sponsored was school choice. I ran that in my campaign, and that took some work, back and forth. And what's interesting is when you co-sponsor a bill, the main sponsor of the bill will introduce it. Well, make sure you know that bill yourself, because things happen and you may have to step up and introduce that. Oh, that gets wild, because you're reading a tremendous amount of material and things start running together, especially you get later in a session where you haven't been getting any more than 2 or 3 hours of sleep in the evening. And because of the way we do things in Wyoming, we're a citizen legislature, we really want to keep that because it keeps us more on task. But in that, everybody tries to get everything as much as they can at one time through. So you gotta learn, it took me a couple of weeks to figure this out. You can't read everything, you can't retain everything. And we were taught by a few in the house that said, don't be afraid to get some rest. So what you have to do is work together on this stuff. And so I kind of tried to take that to heart, but very seldom was I in bed before midnight and up at 5 every day. So long days, but it worked out. I mean, it's high energy, let me tell you. There's a lot of adrenaline going. So a lot of things we did was standing up for our core industries. A lot of folks didn't like the idea that we gave a lot of our mineral extractions some breaks. The thing is, those monies will come back because they will be able to put more into their industry to be able to extract more out. And now that we have an administration federally that is friendly to our core industries, coal, minerals, we will gain back more than what we gave them a break on. It was 0.5% that we gave them a break on this. And also business property tax, got that taken care of. We give them a little bit more because it allows them to be able to invest more into their businesses, which ultimately will gain us more back in the long run. We, of course, there's funny things. I spoke from the House floor about which bathroom to use, and and I'll tell you, we have some fun there because Nina bet me $1 I wouldn't see it from the floor, and I did, so I won $1. But one of the
you gotta tell them what the quote was.
The quote was, cowboys don't use the cowgirl's outhouse. So that was the push on that. So the bill that Dan Larson wrote, I co-sponsored that, and we got that through the House, and it passed through the Senate. And so it defines what restroom we use in public schools, and going through sports events and all that. And watching that process is pretty fascinating because you have to give some and take some, and get your definitions like a lot of those bills that were similar. You get all those definitions. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. And spoke from that from the floor, and we got that one passed through the House, and that worked really well. And it was a request from home. It was a request from home, and so it feels good to be able to do some legislation that people ask you to do and get that pushed through. First Amendment rights, or Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that was signed into law. And that prohibits local governments from burdening your right to freely exercise your faith. we had a really, man, this was a really neat one, an anti-SLAPP bill, which Pepper Hoffman brought, she's from Du Bois. And what it did was was gonna prevent people from being able to sue you just because you had spoken, say we speak in front of a bunch of people like this, well, they didn't like what you say, so they take you to court over it. And yeah, stuff like that happens. It's happened in other states. That one didn't get through the Senate, but we got a lot of high marks that it was one of the best anti-SLAPP bills in the nation. So, you know, you don't win the first time on everything. You gotta work for it. And so, protecting children's rights. So, one of the biggest things, and you'll have more questions from me later, but one of the biggest things we worked very hard on was that supplemental budget. We were up very late, 5 days, getting that over to the Senate. And there's a lot to it, and I have to really admire our Appropriations Committee. They worked through the summer on that thing. They worked long hours. They met 3 times every day. 9 committees were Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. That committee worked late. They were there early, through the noon hour, very late, trying to get that supplemental budget pared down to work. When it got over to the Senate, they added some to it, and then for some unknown reason, and it's kind of hard for me yet to get my mind around it, that Senate leadership decided to dump it in the trash, which I really felt sorry for the people that worked that hard. And we were up late debating that budget. And the industry that was my trade for 43 years, you didn't waste time, because time meant money. We shouldn't be wasting money that way. So, we will work harder to keep things like that from happening. You know, I can only do so much on the House side, but on the Senate side, we can ask them why. Bo Biteman, call Bo Biteman. Why he dumped the supplemental budget in the trash, and maybe we'll get an explanation. So, with that, I will sit down and we can have some questions. We still have time.